Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Curcuruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of conservation and fish and wildlife in our country. I'm John Gassett with the Wildlife Management Institute, and I'm your co-host with Connecting with Conservation. I'm here with my fellow co-host from Outdoor Stewards, Jim Curcuruto. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm excited today. We've got a guest that kind of beat us to the punch. He's been doing what we started doing in September. He's been doing this for a lot longer, reaching the general population with positive messages about hunting. Exactly why we started Connecting with Conservation. So super excited to have on Dan Cabela from, I don't even know from where. We got he does so many things, the Cabela Family Foundation and Hard Truths of Conservation. So welcome, Dan, and thanks for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up a Cabela?
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you guys letting me get on here and hopefully not bore your audience too much, but I'll do my best to keep it short and sweet. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up as a son of Dick and Mary Cabela, founders of Cabela's Sporting Goods in Sidney, Nebraska. So very rural area in the Midwest. And my father, because of the company and what we did, we were introduced to wildlife at a fairly young age. So we did a lot of duck hunting, goose hunting, pheasant hunting, a little bit of deer hunting. And that was kind of, where I got started in the outdoors. And then if you spin forward a little bit, when I got out of high school, I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and lo and behold, I'm still living outside of Austin. So I've been here for quite some time. I like Texas quite a bit, and they've got some outstanding hunting in this state. So I've been here for quite some time. I met my wife, Darlene, about halfway through college, and we're still married. We've got 3 children that are in their 20s, and it's been pretty awesome being down here. And now I'm the executive director for the Cabela Family Foundation, and I spend 200 plus days probably either doing hunting or conservation work every year at this point.
Wow. So when did the foundation start, and what was the reason for starting that?
So the foundation started about 25 years ago, and the reason my folks wanted to be able to give back to the wildlife and the people that helped them to build the company that they had. So when the foundation first started, we primarily were a supportive group. So we really didn't participate in conservation too much because we were too busy running the company. So we mostly supported other organizations, and so now we've kind of flipped that. Now we're still supporting other organizations, but we're also participating in the conservation activities that we support.
And I take it a big part of that is the your television show, The Hard Truths of Conservation, which has taken you all over the world, and you've got some great stories. So I don't know if you want to start. Give us an example of something fun that you've done recently or something that sticks out, maybe in North America, and then we can get into some other ones.
Sure. So Hard Truths, let me give you a little bit of background on that real quick. Back in 2020, when we were kind of shifting, we sold the company in 2017. So our focus kind of shifted to our foundation. And we had decided after we sold the company, let's pour everything into the foundation. Let's stay relevant. Let's try to make change. Let's stop being just a group, an organization that is supportive, but let's actually participate and promote the things that are happening, that hunters are doing for conservation and sustainable utilization. So in 2020, we filmed our pilot. It was a bison episode in Nebraska that was very close to where our brand started. And at that point, I really had no idea where this was going. I was, although we had filmed a lot of hunting shows, we hadn't done this type of a show. So, I wasn't sure where we were headed. We put it out there. Of course, COVID had slowed everything down. But we put the show out there, and History Channel picked it up, which I was super surprised by that, but very happy. I think our thought was to hit the whole time was to hit a non-hunting audience. It was never. I don't think we would have ever been satisfied just to be on one of the hunting channels, because you're really not making change in that environment. You're preaching to the choir. So History Channel was huge for us, and it was a great relationship. And we ran for 2 seasons on History Channel, and then the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet opportunity came up, and that's where we are now. So season 3 is out there right now. It's being broadcast, and we've got another 2 years under contract with Discovery and Animal Planet.
So Dan, you used a term there, a phrase there that I think is incredibly important for these conversations. That's sustainable use, and especially when you're talking to the general public or non-hunting public. Tell us a little bit about how sustainable use of wildlife, informs your decisions and your shows and your foundation, really everything you do.
Well, I think that I'm going to try to answer that. That's a very big question. but I think from our perspective, the way that we try to show the sustainable utilization, and it works all over the world, and it's different. So if you're in the U.S. and you look back to what happened, 100 years ago when we started implementing, or maybe 150 years ago when we started implementing regulations and different licensing and things to ensure that our wildlife would carry on and flourish and grow. That's how we did it here. And in other countries, sustainable use is a little different. In Africa, it's more about connecting communities back to the wildlife and showing them the benefit of the biodiversity that surrounds them, not only as a food source, but also economically. So sustainable use has many levels to it, and it works in modernized countries, and it works in very unmodernized countries. I'm not sure I'm answering your question exactly the way you posed it, but it's a little tough for me to wrap a bow around that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a complex question and a complex answer, and but I think you got what I was getting at is that everywhere wildlife management is done well, regardless of the model, whether it's the North American model that we use or the South African model or whatever, that the ones that are successful hinge around sustainable use. They don't, you can't remove all the animals. It's not sustainable. And they also, I don't think there's as much impact when people are looking at it from, through a pane of glass or from the top of a, photo safari vehicle. The actual taking of animals and using animals for food and other products, and that relationship those hunters have and those people have with those animals in those communities, I think is something that's pretty unique to us.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you kind of hit it on the head right there. Whether it is a photographic safari or hunting, um, an animal that has no value in a modern world really has no future. So as humans expand, there's a lot of us now. The idea of the value of animals becomes critical to their survival, and there's a lot of different ways to keep that in place, whether it's photographic or hunting or or many other things, so I think by keeping value on animals and recognizing the value of animals and bringing that back to the general public can really get people to understand, where we as hunters come from, because that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, and you mentioned there's a lot of us out there, a lot of humans. I kind of went back and dated myself. Born in 1970, there were 210 million Americans. 2025, 55 years later, 330 million Americans, right? So, I mean, huge extra 110 million Americans that have to go someplace, and where they're going was animal habitat. So, I've heard you talk about, loss of habitat and the need to maintain habitats and improve them. So, why don't you fill the audience in on the importance of habitat? And
Well, I think, as the human population expands, whether it be once again in a marginal land or in a modern world, there's no way that doesn't have some sort of impact on our wildlife. Whether that's housing or whether that's stress on natural resources, water, expanding agriculture, expanding livestock, all of these things impact wildlife. So if we're going to coexist, we better find ways to hold on to our larger wild spaces. And hunting is a good land use for that, and so is recreation. Obviously in the US we do that fairly well, but in other parts of the world, without hunting, first of all, the economics of providing income to these villages and a food source, without that, those animals would just go away, right? So we have to educate these communities on the benefit of having the biodiversity around them.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciate about your shows, and I've seen quite a few. I haven't seen them all, but I've seen quite a few of them. Is you have a strong science tie to what you do, and I think a lot of outdoor shows, even educational outdoor shows, miss that. They miss that part that you can't just go and talk about something. You got to actually demonstrate that we're putting these animals back on the landscape, or we're changing something here, and it's actually having an impact, and we're measuring that. We're putting transmitters on animals and figuring out where they go and what they do. That I think that's a part that a lot of folks miss that we really appreciate about what you do. So tell us a little bit about how science informs some of your the show direction and some of your decision making.
Yeah. So when we first got the idea for the show, I mean, the show was never going to be about the Cabela Family Foundation or about Dan Cabela. The show was going to be about the people that are actually out there doing the work. We're just a vehicle to tell that story. So, I mean, the show is really about state agencies, biologists, veterinarians, communities, landowners, all the people doing the heavy lifting. We're just telling the story. I mean, those folks, when you actually get them to tell their story, and we should have done this a long time ago, I think it's extremely compelling. There's a lot of people who are non-hunters or not part of the science community or understand what it is that we do. They like to look at a sheep standing on a rock on the side of the mountain, but they might not necessarily understand what it takes to keep that sheep up there standing on that rock on that mountain. And that's kind of the story we're trying to tell. And there's so many people that are so committed to wildlife. That's been one of the greatest experiences of me hosting this show. It's also a journey for me. I've learned so much, and I've been so inspired by the people that we've had on the show.
so, yeah, John and I, been doing the podcast now. I think maybe around our 40th guest, and we've learned a lot as well too. But you mentioned, you just drive by, and a lot of people take wildlife for granted. And you mentioned bighorn sheep, but I know you've done a couple episodes on that. And disease is a big factor, right? And just the everyday American doesn't realize that. I didn't know much about it, so to tell the story about managing disease in populations such as bighorn sheep?
Yeah. So, you know, when we all look at sheep, especially if you've hunted them, because you can get beaten down pretty easily chasing sheep around. I'll be going on a stone sheep hunt on Tuesday, so I'll be up there, and that's never an easy task. And you see these sheep out there, and you think, what an incredibly tough animal to live in this environment, to jump around on these rocks. But they're also very susceptible to disease, which is something that a lot of us don't think about. Ov pneumonia is the disease that's affecting a lot of the sheep populations, and that comes from mostly, domestic sheep that are surrounding. They're carriers of it, but it doesn't really affect them that much. And these sheep overlap, and then they get it and carry it back to the wild sheep and pass it on. And also, the aoudad that are out in Texas, which we introduced there, are another carrier, and they've impacted the bighorn sheep out in Texas pretty seriously. So one of the episodes that's coming out in next season will be, a very big move from. I think we moved 77 sheep from Elephant Mountain up to the Franklin Mountain Range to try to isolate them from the aoudad.
We've seen a number of your shows, but what are some of the newer things you're looking at? What's on the horizon for you? There's probably a limitless number of potential shows out there with all the wildlife species across the world. But what do you got coming next? This big and exciting.
Well, so next season we're already filming, obviously, and some of it's even in post production. Um, as I mentioned, we've got the another sheep translocation episode coming up in Texas. And then we've got some stuff in Asia. We just got done filming what will probably be 3 episodes in Africa. I only think 2 of them will be in next season. The third would probably be pushed back, but we went to Mozambique and we brought in a couple new lions for our lion project there to further diversify the genetics. And then we did some collaring of elephants and cheetahs, and we tagged some pangolin. And it was really action packed and really a great conservation experience. We had a lot of family there. So there's that. There's a couple of Africa episodes. We're doing a big elephant episode about the overpopulation of elephants in southern Africa. What else are we doing? That's certainly not everything. There's another whitetail episode about the impact of whitetail hunting on rural America. Geez.
Sounds like you got your hands full traveling all over the place. And, I would definitely, recommend to our viewers to check out, some of these episodes, not only for the animal stories, but for those human stories, like I said, the heroes of conservation. They're not getting rich out there, climbing around, crawling into black bear dens and climbing up mountains and, moose, with ticks on them and all that sort of stuff. But, I found it interesting that the sheep would not be there without the biologists. The disease would wipe out entire herds, right? So you have to go there and test the herds and remove them. And similarly with moose, I saw you did an episode with moose and ticks. I didn't really even know that about ticks, so that's another good story. But why don't you tell maybe a story about some of these biologists that you met and all the hard work they do?
Oh, I've met so many great biologists. And in fact, I just spent, well, let me not go back quite that far. We were just collaring brown bear on Kodiak, and Nathan Svoboda, which is a area biologist for Alaska Fish and Game. We were working with him, and I've worked with him before, and he is a really genuine, awesome guy, great guy, but super committed to to understanding more about brown bear behavior, and that was an unbelievable experience. I mean, I've done a lot of apex predators in Africa, and we've done some stuff with black bear in the U.S., but I've never done brown bear. So that was getting out there and knocking down these brown bear and putting collars on them and weighing them and checking them for general health. I mean, it was an incredible experience, and I Nathan is one of my favorite guys to work with, and he's so committed, and I learned so much from him and all the other biologists. Really, I mean, it's been an educational experience for me doing these shows. I mean, these folks know so much more than any of the rest of us do, and I just love absorbing all that knowledge from them.
Yeah, they're an incredibly passionate bunch about what they do too. You know, they believe in what they do. They love it. They live it, breathe it. And you know, as a former director, I argued for years that they should get hazard pay. Our officers got hazard pay because you know they're law enforcement and they had to protect the resource. But I'm like, have you ever trapped a brown bear? Have you ever flown in a helicopter when they're net gunning? You know, we use rifles, we use tranquilizer drugs that are extremely dangerous. Matter of fact, so dangerous that, you know, they're all the fentanyl and carfentanil variety. They can't even use them anymore because of the human abuse. They're shocking fish in water with, you know, 20,000 volts DC into water. And it's like, how does this not get hazard pay? These people are, you know, putting their lives on the line every day. So, but you're right. They're incredibly passionate and incredibly committed to what they do. So we certainly appreciate all them. And that's another unsung story. I think the general public doesn't realize that there's this cadre of professionals out there that, you know, a lot of them, and including me, believe it or not, reason we went into this profession is you really like dealing with people. You know, you want to deal with the animals. They're a lot easier to deal with. And you find out that, you know, the hard part's dealing with the people. You know, animals are easy. But yeah, telling that story to the public like you do about, you know, the dedication of these folks and showing the dedication and the commitment to what they do is incredible. And we appreciate the fact that you do that.
Well, I mean, they're the ones doing the work. I mean, as I said earlier, you know, I, I've really enjoyed. I mean, being a part of all this conservation work with all the state agencies and even biologists overseas, but I'm not going to take credit for any of that stuff that happens in our shows because it's those folks they're the ones out there doing all the heavy lifting, and all I've done is try to spread that message, but also gained a ton of insight myself, you know, by listening to them and watching the work that they do.
So you may not give yourself any credit for that, but we certainly do because what you're doing is providing the lens so that the public can see that because otherwise it wouldn't be there. You know, people wouldn't know about the grizzly bear and the brown bear biologists doing what they do and the sheep biologists because, you know, without a show like yours, that doesn't exist. It's not done in downtown New York City. It's done in some of the remote places on the planet. So, yeah, we appreciate it and we give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, thank you.
And then, you know, they're digestible, right? Episodes are a half hour, kind of like what we're trying to do here, keep them digestible. But talking about digestion, and you know, when you do bring hunting into the show, you always bring the food aspect, and because that's why we hunt, right? For the food. So, what are some of your favorite, I guess, game animals to digest?
Well, you know, I like to try it all. Which, if you watch the show, you can see that I like to try pretty much everything. I would say my favorite. I think the African desert animals are really good. I'm not sure why, but those animals that come from arid environments are really tasty. Um, I obviously also enjoy, you know, the ones that we all enjoy, elk, and I love deer. We probably eat more whitetail than anything, just because we have a lot of it. But I also enjoy that, you know, the experience of eating things that I can't normally get. I just got back 2 days ago, actually, from Coral Harbor up in Nunavut, and I accompanied some Inuits on a walrus hunt. And that's the first time I've ever eaten walrus, and I probably think that'll be the last time I ever eat walrus. I don't think I'll be on another walrus hunt. So it wasn't as good as the arid environment venison, but it was good, and I'm really glad that I tried it. I've actually had narwhal with the Inuits, which was
Wow.
interesting as well.
So and not only can hunters feed themselves, their family, their friends, but sharing it. Not only in the U.S. are we providing millions of meals to those less fortunate, but in Africa especially. And there's a misperception that trophy hunting is a term that used to not mean much until Cecil Lion came around. So talk about the importance of where that game meat goes for when hunting in Africa.
Yeah, so uh, there's different levels of that. Obviously, I can tell you that nothing is wasted. Um, so if you're in a big camp, um, of course you're going to first of all feed the staff, and then it's going to filter out to their villages. But then there's also places where there's small camps where you will go out and do these meat drops to the villages and support them with much needed protein in your offtake. And that serves a dual purpose, right? Because it not only um, you not only utilize the animal that you've harvested completely, but you also provide food to communities that quite possibly could be snaring animals and things like that. Indiscriminate hunting, which at that point you're not taking the old mature males. You're whatever walks in that snare is what ends up in that snare, and a lot of it even gets wasted. Um, so I think that there is a dual purpose to that, and it's not only beneficial to the community members, but it's also beneficial to the wildlife.
Right. And then, to have that balance, it's not just hunters. You have a big initiative, right? The foundation, the Cabela's Family Foundation, with big cat reintroduction. You mentioned lions and cheetahs. So I assume that's ongoing. What's the story with that?
Yeah, so in 2018 with the 24 Lions project, we did the biggest translocation across the international boundary in history. We took 24 lions from 5 reserves in South Africa and moved them into 2.5 million acres in the Zambezi Delta area of Mozambique. And the reason behind that was there had been an operator there that we know, Mark Haldane of Zambezi Delta Safaris, and he had been there since the early '90s. So first restoration effort really after the Civil War. And when he got there was really, he saw a lot of potential, but there wasn't a lot of wildlife. So years and years um, of conservation work. Through hunting, through sustainable use, all of those animal numbers have come up, and it's really a mecca for wildlife now. But the one thing that never really returned was the apex predators. And the reason for that is it's very remote, it's a delta region, and although it's vast and there's not many people in it, on the periphery, there are communities and towns and cities. So that creates a barrier for these apex predators to get back in. So we brought 24 lions back in. It was, probably the most meaningful conservation project I've ever been involved with. And this June, roughly a month ago or so, we were able to say that we now have over 100 lions in the Zambezi Delta. And we also moved some cheetahs in there in 2021. So we brought in tried to reestablish cheetahs as well as the lions there. The cheetahs have been a little more challenging. Little more delicate than the tank nature of the lions. Lions, you kind of put them out there and they do their own thing, right? So the cheetahs have been more challenging, but still that it's an ongoing project, and there's been plenty of success there as well.
All right. I was just going to say one of my favorite stories involves cheetahs. We were watching a group of cheetahs in South Africa one time. We were actually in Kruger, but there was 3 or 4, if I remember correctly, in some fairly tall grass. So they're dodging in and out, but they're just cruising along, and unexpectedly a group of springbok come the other direction, and they didn't see the cheetahs until it was too late. But all of a sudden there's animals bouncing everywhere and cheetahs jumping in the air, and it was just like, this is right out of Wild Kingdom right here. It's like that sold me on Africa. After that, I was like, I go every year I can. It's just highly recommended. So,
I bet that was an awesome experience.
It is an awesome experience. And we were right by ourselves in the middle of Kruger. It's like, there's not another car around. It's like, how often does this happen? So it was a great experience. So we appreciate all you do for the big cats, especially. So.
All right. So I guess, we covered a lot today, and where can folks go to find out more information on not only Cabela's Family Foundation, but the Hard Truths of Conservation, where they can view it and just get more information on conservation?
Yeah, so the web pages, you've got CabelaFamilyFoundation.org. and hardtruthsofconservation.com. And then on social, IG and Facebook, once again, it's Cabela Family Foundation. You've got the Dan Cabela page, and then you've got on Facebook, Hard Truths of Conservation.
Outstanding. Well, Dan, we appreciate you coming on today, and we appreciate all that you do for conservation of our wildlife resources. I know we talked about a lot of the passionate people out there doing the work, the biological work and all that, but all that work means a lot less if we're not telling the story to the public, to the people who don't get to experience the things.
The general public has no idea. I mean, they really do not have any idea of what's going on. I mean, like I said, I mean, everybody loves to look at wildlife, but there's a lot of reasons why that wildlife is there, and it's worth telling the story for sure. Also, selfishly, it's extremely interesting to me. I mean, I love being around people doing this work.
Well, keep telling those stories. We'll keep watching them and living vicariously through you. We appreciate everything you do. And to our listeners, please, if you like our show, please subscribe to us. That way you'll get notices when the next ones drop. Visit Dan's website, check out his shows, Hard Truths of Conservation, excellent shows. And this is coming from somebody who's done wildlife since he was basically an adult. I think it's one of the best ones out there. So listen to those. If you like our podcast, listen to some others and tell your friends about us. And other than that, we appreciate you, and we'll see you in the woods or on the water. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.